Hey everyone, it's an AI agents kind of day. You're watching TechStrong Gang. Hi everyone, happy Thursday. Welcome to TechStrong Gang. We've got, as I said in the outset, it's all about AI agents today. It's not just today. It seems like it's about AI agents every day. Are they glorified API calls? Are they truly intelligent, unintelligent? We're going to discuss it, I guess. But we're going to look at AI agents from a couple of different angles today, and we've got some great people to talk about it with. Let me introduce you to our gang for today. We've got Jack Gold. Always a pleasure to have Jack. Our cyber reporter, Teri Robinson, at All Things Cyber, as well as All Things. Also cyber and AI and all things is our friend Chris Blask. And joining me, our man in Silicon Valley, John Swartz. John, good to see you. All right. Gang, let's jump into it. Workday recently had, I guess it's their user conference out in the Valley or in San Francisco. John, you attended. You got an article on this. They recently also hired my friend Gabe Monroy, who he's been at Google and Microsoft, but I think he came over from Google this last time. And or maybe actually he was at DigitalOcean in between this gig. But anyway, they announced a lot going on there. And of course, Workday's HR and stuff like that. Give us the scoop, John. What's happening?
Yeah, so when you said HR, those are the magic two letters, or not AI, but HR in this case. So Workday made a ton of announcements around agents, around a new platform. But basically, it centers on HR and making it or automating it so that all those tasks that you did are supposedly going to be a lot simpler and easier, but you're going to probably have to make a trade-off in some sort of a fashion in that this will be autonomous. You can't ask for the human element, but this idea is to strip it down and streamline the operation as much as possible. So Workday did three big things. They announced some more new Workday Illuminate agents, which are specifically for HR, finance, and industry applications. They announced something called People, a developer platform that lets customers and partners create, share, and scale AI-powered solutions within Workday's ecosystem. And they announced a data cloud, Workday Data Cloud, data infrastructure layer to help organizations maximize their strategy and HR and finance data. They also announced a partnership with Microsoft. And, to summarize, I talked to a couple of folks there at the events, including the guy who runs Workday AI named Shane Luke. He's a young guy, really sharp guy. And he told me that basically he acknowledged that employees, as well as HR employees, understandably are going to be hesitant about using these tools because of data and privacy concerns, as well as their job security in the case of the employees, but that he kind of drops it or divides this crowd of employees and customers into two crowds. There's the tech forward crowd, which is really excited about doing this. And then there's the other crowd, which is hesitant. So in addition to him, I talked to one of the customers of Workday, and he described their HR process, which sounded to me like a nightmare. You basically had to make calls or use email to do almost anything. And at this point, the idea is to simplify things to 3 steps or less. So on one hand, this might be good for an employee. It might make it easier for an HR department. I think the trade-off is that eventually the human is taken out of the equation, which I think could lead to other issues. And that's where I will leave it and hand off the baton to y'all.
I think this is the kind of thing, as I look forward, that drives me to using terms like inevitability curve, right? We take HR so let's step all the way back. HR, I've got a very good friend who's a founder of a very successful company, 35 years in, and he says that one of the points of failure was when they had to have an HR department, because for all the good people working in HR, we all understand that it is this department that I'll stereotype and say claims to love you until the day he fires you and is very polite as it walks out the door. And it's an artifact, I think, of the sort of digitization of business and people and so forth. It only goes so far, right? And so these semantic systems I'm always talking about, HR is the perfect example. You should have inside your company a story, a semantics system that says, I run the company, I understand the humans who work here and how to handle them, how to handle their needs and capabilities and use and productivity. And we don't. And if we stick AI in a clinical, centralized, immoral, unethical, unfounded basis into these structures, it's going to be as Orwellian and just awful as you can imagine. But I don't think we will. I think we might try to, and we'll find out how awful that is, which will, back to the point that started this rant, curve us back to something more sane. And I think the more sane structures are possible now. It's just we're pushing the limits of the old structure, and this will break them.
Yeah, I think it's also imperative to think about it from the perspective of the first time you have a lawsuit because you put AI in your HR department, all of this stuff is going to get ripped out in 13 seconds, right? And it's really a problem because most companies have their own kind of HR ecosystem going, right? It's not just three people in an office somewhere. There's all kinds of stuff. There's tentacles throughout the total organization. And how do you build an HR model that's individualized for each company? It's really tough to do. It's possible, but it's also very expensive. It requires an awful lot of learning, an awful lot of data that most companies aren't going to spend time putting in place. The ROI of doing it is probably pretty low compared to the ROI of putting AI into something like DevOps or security or sales enablement, customer support, et cetera. So I'm not convinced that most companies are going to adopt this very quickly. It's probably more appropriate for smaller companies where the HR department is probably smaller and has less stuff going on around it. But it's a real uphill battle to put this into some big company.
I'll bet you a lunch or something. Or anybody that wants to win this one, I'll make a prediction anyways. I'll be held to this one. 3 years from now, I think what you're saying right now is absolutely true. But 3 years from now, it's going to be really cheap and easy. And if you don't do it, your competitors will, and they will just economically wipe you out. Running HR the way we have traditionally, small, because we're doing this now, right, without getting into all that. But at the small business level, you're right. You can take a small business and say you don't really do HR. But if you actually put a system in that understands there's humans here, you'll be more efficient and profitable now. That'll take a couple of years to regularize and scale out to large enterprises, but I think this is an evolutionary thing.
Scott,
you're still trying to do.
We'll have to get back together in 3 years, Chris. To see
well, there's a lunch riding on this.
Yeah, at least.
But that's right. That's big deal, right?
A couple of beers, probably.
I just put an alert in my calendar for you guys.
Please do. Please do. So I got some thoughts. First of all, I've always hated the term HR. It sounded so antiseptic. Human resources. I always liked the people department because really that's what it's about. It's about dealing with people. Now, I've worked for big companies. I've helped build bigger companies, and I've worked for a lot of startups, and mostly TechStrong, has been a startup. I think until you get to a certain size, you really don't need an HR company, an HR department. And then I think the other thing is, I've been a big believer in PEOs for tech companies for going on 20 years now. One of the bigger ones companies that I helped build back in the .com, we went with TriNet, and I've used I've used a lot of them, ADP, Insperity, and they all have pluses and minuses. But part of what they do is the sort of HR function, if you will, and they'll even sit in when you have to let someone go or something. But that being said, it is something that lends itself to process heavy function, I think lends itself well to agentic AI, right? Because that's what the agents are good for. If you have a very defined process, have at it. But the thing about HR or people that is unique, though, is you're still dealing people to people. And if it's so straitjacketed A to B to C to D with the agent, it doesn't account for people. Good, Chris.
It's funny you say that word because all this, ourselves as an example, little tiny startup, they were literally at the point right now where we had to do exactly this. And it turns out the term we decided to use, is people. In our corporate repo, in our corporate structure, file structure, where we record people and things and assets and also everything we do, there's a file structure that's called people. Under that are the people. And under each of the people are what we are hoping is a structure that represents who they are as a person, which works for the company and everything else, but is actually really a human being. And as we say in all these different segments, AI is not running an LLM against a thing. It's structuring a system. It's structuring a semantic system that includes all sorts of automation that's running in Linux and Git or whatever. There's things that are happening in systems all the time, some of which are calling LLMs doing things. But it's the structure, is it a semantic structure? Does it make sense? And our view, and this is both us as a company and the open source civic AI approach, is that systems should be semantic. And all that means is exactly what we're doing here. You should be able to say them out loud and make sense, right? You can't, there are logical sentences you can put together that semantically make no sense at all, right? The sky is blue because of hammers. Semantic, structurally makes sense, semantically does not. We need to build technical systems and business systems that we can say out loud without, sounding like we're nuts at some point. And the HR I think, Alan, you and I at least agree, in the entire corporate structure is that kind of thing where by the time you finish explaining it, you've just proven it. Oh, we need this system to make sure that our people are more happy. And no, they're not. No, we don't. It doesn't work.
I got the impression sorry, Alan. I got the impression from talking to the folks here and reading what this will do, that they're not entirely certain how it's going to work out. They're anticipating a lot of pushback and back and forth, especially over things like medical benefits or, payroll. And Teri, not to go too deep on this, but I think back to, I had a former employer where I had an operation for kidney stone removal, and they claimed it was a pre-existing condition, and I had to fight them for weeks before I eventually got them to pay. So I kind of foresee these type of surprises cropping up, and even the guy at Workday, Shane, he acknowledged it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Teri.
Well, I was just going to say, and some of the process stuff, I can see where this is useful, right? I also agree that maybe smaller companies don't need it, although they need something like a TriNet or whatever they're doing, because I've worked for places I worked for a company that got taken over by another sort of smaller entity, and they didn't have any kind of HR in place, and it was a disaster. It was awful. But yeah, this, and then maybe something that takes the bias out of some of the decisions that are made around HR issues, if you will, like John, like your kidney stone, which I share this with you,
All right.
But with something like that, where you don't have somebody sort of making maybe a biased decision, maybe it's just cut and dry. This is what we cover. This is what we don't,
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with HR. I find that I like a lot of HR people. I've worked with some very talented ones, but I've also found, and it is a thing that you do learn, that they work for the company and not for you as a person working for the company. And it's kind of like the IRS has its own tax court. They make all the decisions about what goes on internally.
But the problem with HR, or the challenge with HR, I shouldn't say problem, but the challenge with HR is that most companies are unique and people are unique, right? Yeah. And so if you're putting everything into an AI agent that's going to be making the same decision, no matter whether it's John or Jack or Teri or Chris or Alan, that may not be the right decision either for the company or the individual. And that becomes the problem. How do you build an agent that is flexible enough to understand the differences that people need. I mean, we're talking about humans here, whether it's a kidney stone, whether it's, I don't know, you've got a medical problem and you can only work 4 days a week in the office or something. There's lots of stuff that goes on with people, right? And I'm really concerned that trying to build an agent, a unique agent for each company, because for the most part, every company is going to be unique, is going to be a real challenge.
Yeah. It can't be a unique agent for each company, and I think I know we're sort of at time for the segment, but it's a unique agent for each company is not the way to do it. But and again, we're actually as a company trying to lay this out right now, and I think the answer comes less down to whether it's an AI or a human, person making the decision on things. It's whether the company understands the people that actually work there. So, when we put assets together to do something, again, we're very early, so maybe I'm wrong about all this, but I think we have a structure that accounts for that, where you don't just say, John, level 1 qualification slot project, but you say, John, kidney stones 4 days a week, in a way that a company can hold that information respectfully, as we do in our heads. We just don't write it down. But we get HR departments, we try to write it all down, and they turn back into corporate machines anyway.
So maybe the AI goes for the process stuff, but you have to build whatever your people department, your HR, as the cultural part of that is really rests on, the people and really understanding the culture of the company.
So
that's where you need people. That's where you need. I mean,
that's where you need people. You can't just.
Yeah. Let me tie this up a bit, and we'll segue to our next section, which is, and forget HR for a second. Forget the problems inherent in HR and people and what have you. The fact is, this is a case where we're seeing agentic AI move beyond software development, software testing, software deployment, which is where we spend a lot of our time, and gives us a glimpse into the true impact that agentic AI is going to have up and down the entire corporate structure and the entire realm of workers. And whether, today it's HR, tomorrow it's sales, the next day it's finance, and distribution, operations, and everything else. We're going to come back and talk specifically about security agents. You're watching TechStrong, gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey everyone, we're back here, continuing our Agentic AI Thursday. Go figure. Next, I think we're going to turn the microscope or telescope or some sort of scope onto the security agents, the rise of security agents. So we're seeing multiple cyber companies rolling out agentic AI, agents to do a bevy of different security tasks. Teri, you've been following this one. What do we got here?
Okay, so I'm talk to you about a trio of things that we've been reporting. First, I'm just going to say it's amazing to me that agentic AI, particularly in security, sort of went from this little twinkle maybe earlier in the year to something that's becoming more fulsome and expansive. So we have three stories. One is about CrowdStrike, and they were already introducing AI agents into their SOCs, right? Or into SOCs. And now they've expanded that, or SOCs workflows. Now they've expanded that, and they've acquired Pangea. So that's an effort to secure AI applications. Lasso also added an agentic AI service, and that is for securing AI applications. I think we should talk about that a little bit more in our discussion. And then Eve Security has also applied agentic AI to observability and policy enforcement, which I kind of think is interesting and maybe a good place for AI agents. I would like to, discuss that a little bit more as well. But so we're suddenly seeing this flurry of activity, like it's become more accepted and maybe a must do. But when it comes to security, I'm always a little suspicious of having the fox guard in-house or some sort of what seems like self monitoring and regulation. I just don't. I don't know how. I guess I don't trust AI and agentic AI enough yet to feel comfortable with that.
The challenge in security, though, and I see why so many people are trying to implement AI. The challenge of security is that it's such a broad need that very few companies have the resources to do it properly. I mean, you can get, how many negative hits do you get before you get a positive hit? And how do you go through all the negative hits to make sure that you don't have to react to them? So in that sense, what we're talking about is really volume enhancement. It's the ability to go through a lot of stuff that you just can't hire enough humans to do, or may not even have the skill set. But Teri, you're right. AI, it's going to be an AI versus AI world, right? The bad guys are going to have AI as well. They're going to have their own agents. So it's going to be my agent against your agent, and who finds the hole that needs to be filled or can't be filled. And how do I react to that? It's going to be a really difficult problem. And it gets worse when you start talking about security issues within AI, not just security issues in general, but holes in AI that need to be filled that aren't filled. We've all seen the stories about Grok. Well, we won't go through that, but it's too depressing. But those are the kinds of things that are really of concern. And if you're putting AI in charge of your security and it screws up, how do you even know?
Well, how do you know? That's the thing. How do you know it's screwed up, and to what extent it's screwed up? And then how do you keep it from perpetuating the screw ups through other things? I had a coffee yesterday with John Waters from iCounter. You guys know him. He used to be with Mandiant, and we discussed a lot of this stuff. And of course, this is maybe the way everything is going, but there's got to be some precautions here.
It's interesting. In the last segment, we were talking about HR, and now we're talking about security. And I always like security because it's very serious, right? And it's not just ones and zeros, but there's stakes and good guys and bad guys and critical infrastructure. And a lot of us, in our careers, get to work with actual conflict, actual warfare. And the most important part of this is civics, right? And I was on this show earlier this year when I was mostly yelling at this stupid ChatGPT and bitching about how terrible the industry was and bad the products are, which is true, but I was wrong about how bad they were in which directions. However, but all of our work, all the work we're doing now started with exactly AI for civics, for critical global issues at the civics level, which is as meta as you want to get, as we all know. Ones and zeros are easy and complex networks are fun. But actual individual humans, groups, civics is the most complicated realm. And I'm here to tell you, or at least I'll attest to this, and I'll stand by it, that they're very, very good when applied at the civics level with all those stakes. So I'll go back to what I said earlier this year, which I think I've even said it live, and I didn't, I was just going to say it out loud, even though I wasn't sure about it. But yeah, the way you fight AI is with AI. Exactly like you just said, right? It is right now about the bad guys' AI and the good guys' AI. If good guys don't want to use the AI, they will lose. Now, all the flaws of the AI, yeah, absolutely true. However, pragmatically, if you're not using it for defense, you're going to lose. You have 6 months, maybe.
Yeah, let's play thermonuclear war.
I was thinking like a Westworld in a scenario where for all the positive things, what could go wrong? And it brings me back to the previous segment. And Chris mentioned this. You think about HR and their ambivalence and maybe some caution about its use. And I think about security, and the red alarms go off even more so until something horribly happens or goes askew, and which leads to lawsuits or some sort of damage or some sort of headlines. So I don't know. Do you think maybe there might be these agentic AI trailblazers you kind of learn early and kind of set a path for others? I mean, maybe they jump whole hog into HR and security and educate us that way.
Let's look at it a little bit differently, right? Let's look at it from the perspective of various vertical markets. So if you're a bank, right, and you're putting AI security in place to secure your accounts, and it fails, people just lost $1 gazillion, right? You're going to get sued, and the feds are going to come after you, and there's all kinds of bad ramifications. If you're if you're McDonald's and somebody gets a hamburger order wrong, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you, right? They're going to redo the order. You're going to someone's going to go to the counter and say, hey, you screwed up. You put pickles on it. I don't want it onions or whatever. It's not such a big deal. So it really is not across the board. I think a lot of this agentic AI stuff is going to be vertical specific. And for instance, banks are notoriously, who did it first? I'm not going to do it till someone else does it, improves it, right? Financial markets are like that. Tech, not so much. Techs are trailblazers. They'll go off and just play with it because they can. So it's going to be an interesting rollout for a lot of this technology, but I think it's going to be very dependent on the verticals and how fast it actually gets rolled out. And the first time you have a real glitch, a real problem, it's going to, in a lot of these verticals, is going to get stopped in its tracks.
You know, Jack, what you're describing is very much the crossing the chasm model.
Yeah.
Right? You got 15% of the market that are early adopters. In this case, it's probably tech companies, and we're talking software development, deployment, stuff like that. Then you've got, once you reach that early adopter model, then you got to kind of cross the chasm into the mainstream. But that mainstream is not homogeneous, right? It's broken into strata. And if we, at a very basic level, there's two pieces of the mainstream. So about 35% of the market are early mainstream adopters. They generally are the ones who, look, I saw the early adopters had some success. I'm willing to give this a try because I think my problems are so serious, and that if this thing works, I'm going to come out way ahead. Right? And that's about half of that mainstream market, 35% of market. The second half of the mainstream market are a little bit more cautious, conservative. They say, I'm not going to adopt that until I see my peers already adopted it and have some success with it. And if they don't have some success with it, I'm not adopting it. And that's the latter half of that mainstream market. Again, about 35% of the market. So between them, that's 70%. You got 15% early adopters, right? 85%. That's critical mass. And then you got 15% of are laggards who are never going to adopt it, not anytime soon. I think that's what you got here with AI in general, and especially with agentic AI.
But we're specifically talking security in this segment, though, right? So I agree with both of you entirely on the market adoption. I will say that in this case, it's just literally true. And I'll walk you through exactly what that means if you're out there. Use AI right now to look at your security posture. That can be done by anybody. Iteratively. All the failures and weaknesses of these products don't get you started. We don't have time. Just sit down if you have nothing else. Particularly if you can't access somebody who can show up on a show like this, which is 90% of companies out there. Use AI to figure out where you are, and to go all the way. Say in Jack, to your points. Yeah. Yes. If you are critical and you're really implementing things and you're big and have the resources and capabilities, you will be putting agentic AI in. You will not be doing it in the kind of ways that fail. If one person or one AI agent is your weakness, then you've got a bad system. right? And there are ways to architect good systems where you can use agentic AI and trust it enough to do the things that you trust humans enough to do things in those critical situations, which is quite often more than one human. But, that's, again, too much detail. So, but if you do not do these things in cybersecurity over the next 6-12 months, whatever market you're in, you are compromised. Absolutely. That's the way the world is.
I think
I'm a little more cynical too, though. I think there's this group, and maybe they fall within those categories you're talking about, Alan, that do things strictly based on money and, how much it's going to cost them if they do or don't do something like that.
Sure.
And
ROI and TCO are huge.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing about security specifically, though, is look, the bad guys are certainly using.
Yep.
And so there is a little, I need this to do that. The Eve security one, I did interview, I think it's their CEO or CTO. And, they just came out of stealth, basically, Israeli cyber company. And they're using, it's an interesting piece, they're using AI to secure AI agent interactions. So,
Okay.
a novel or a somewhat novel approach. Anyway, we're about out of time for this segment. Let's come back to C Block today. Sticking with our agentic AI theme, we'll talk a little bit about DevOps.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everyone, we're back here, and our C Block today is DevOps agents come this way, right? And it comes out of a story we have up, I believe, on DevOps.com. Joe Duffy, CEO founder of Pulumi, they've recently announced rolling out some AI agents that are specifically trained to automate infrastructure management. Infrastructure is code, stuff like this. Pulumi is a pretty well-known player in the open source infrastructure as code, infrastructure management space. A lot of people use the open source project. It's kind of they have sort of an open core SaaS model as well. But, the AI agent here is the new wrinkle to this. And, if one says, look, if we're moving infrastructure management, if we're moving infrastructure is code, an AI agent seems to make sense. It should be able to help manage that, right? I mean, at some level, the infrastructure is code sort of movement, going back to Puppet and Chef and Ansible and these products, it has a history, right? If we could reduce our infrastructure to code and therefore it's sort of repeatable, programmable, why wouldn't an AI agent make sense there? It's not like we're dealing with people in the HR issue, in other words. However, and more power to Joe Duffy and the Pulumi people. They've done a good job over there. I think we're going to run into the same reluctance, though. The same reluctance. And quite frankly, I think that reluctance raises its head in security as well, right? I had this with security automation when we tried to roll out from IDS to IPS and automated remediation and vulnerability management. People aren't so cool to just let the machines go, right?
Yeah.
This isn't quite the Matrix yet, and we don't have Mr. Smith. So, Chris, now that I'm looking at you, you do look a little Mr. Smithish. I don't know. Maybe Chris is an agent, but but kidding aside, I think what we're really, and this is, we've been now through 3 segments of this. What we're really talking about is a question of trust.
Yeah.
Do we trust these AI agents to do the job we think they're going to do? Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
I was thinking about like I said, the third segment today. I'm trying to think of a different way to say this, and I just had a great way to say it, and I've lost it, and we're on air, which is just lovely. But it's a semantic situation. We need to be able to say it, and if we say the story is, like you said, we have IDS. You and I were there, right? Is there snippers and so forth, and say, hey, they can stop things, and we're going to let them do it? I don't know. We're used to things breaking all the bloody time. So the story that we're in leads us to the place where, in our roles, we're supposed to be. We're literally, where's the novelist amongst us, right? Because if you're writing stories about these sort of situations, the characters playing our roles in this case would naturally be suspicious. That's what we expect. But the narrative of AI, right? In the last segment, this is what it was. In the last segment, we're saying we're going to use AI to save us from AI, which is really just a way of saying we're going to use technology to save us from technology, which is, of course, we say AI like it's something. It's a terrible acronym in the first place. It's neither artificial nor intelligent. It's a large language model that processes data in semantic forms and produces results that are metricable. And look, yes, there are analogies with humans. They're not human. They're not going to be human. We may get to all sorts of interesting Turing test levels now. We're kind of at them, but it makes no bloody difference. It's technology. We use technology to secure technology, to develop technology. This technology is no different than hashtag cryptographic, anything else. And we need to get our heads away from looking at it as something other than technology. It is another technology. Every time we say AI, we have Frankenstein and Skynet and pop on our heads, and we can't bring ourselves to get through the meeting to have the decision to develop or implement or take the next step.
Yeah, but
reality is perception's reality. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jack.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, Chris, this one's a little different because technology in the past, we went from mainframes to mini computers to PCs to mobile phones. Those are all great technologies, very useful, but at the end of the day, we were controlling them. The difference with AI is that we're letting AI control us. And to a large extent wait a minute, but let me finish. So to a large extent, the risk is much higher. I mean, technology versus technology, I get it. We're using technology to try to fight, ransomware as an example in security, right? We're not being very successful at it. It's getting better, but we're not there yet. And the bad guys are as good as the good guys are in using that technology for their purposes. So, and because they're spending more money doing it and they're getting better people to do it.
They're more innovative right now.
Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned, it's interesting, Jack and Chris, that there's this kind of whole debate about AI, whether we're in charge or it's in charge. And it even comes down to like some of the two biggest names put out a study earlier this week where Anthropic says that wholeheartedly AI is taking over our workplace, while Anthropic says that, while OpenAI on the flip side goes, no, we're using it for our own personal use. So I'm reading between the lines. I understand why they came to those conclusions, which are all self-serving, but it feeds into this debate about this technology, which in a sense, there is like that wild card element to it in some.
Well, exactly. I mean, and in the past with technology too, I mean, I've been around a long time and have seen these things sort of spin out. It's been sort of more deliberate, right? And AI doesn't, and I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel deliberate. It feels like it, and out of the gate, without the guardrails, before we know what it's doing. And that's not the way tech necessarily worked in the past. There was a lot of deliberation. There was a lot of thought behind some of these things and a lot of control over the environments. We've got, and maybe it's the way of the world. There's less control over development environments and everything else these days. They're not the same as they used to be.
I think in many ways we think there was more control than there used to be. And Jack, to start with your perspective of this technology, as I look at it, goes back thousands of years. I mean, this stuff in our lifetimes is fascinating, and And the risk is right, as we'll agree, risk right now for all this is maximum. Couldn't get more, as complicated, as high stakes as you can possibly get. But it's not about this current LLM as such. It is about semantic structures and so forth. And technology, as I look at it, was, we go back 10,000 years and 5,000 years ago, we really started building things, writing things down, encoding things that had to exist in our heads as functional rules that literally, come down to how physically big we'll build things, where you can live, what you can do. Those are technology structures, that our species has been developing all along. We're at this point right now where we've been able to, since the Industrial Revolution, mechanize, steampunk it, digitize it, and come up with analogs of functional systems that work really well. Now, I'm as surprised as anybody. I kind of expected the digital AI. We have semantic AI. FML, isn't that fascinating? It's actually using the structures we use in our brains, to process information analogously to the way we do. And we can't control it like we can, steam in a boiler. It's a funny thing.
Let me go back to my trust thing. And Chris, you said something, and let me expand on that and bring that back to trust. And it goes to what Jack said as well. If you could think the world's 6,000 years old, but let's assume it's not, right? That it's been around a little longer. And the fact of the matter is, Homo sapiens, humans have been around, depending who you believe, 200,000-300,000 years, right? It was kind of the rise of the Homo sapien genus. If it was 300,000 years, for 290,000 of those years, we really didn't have much technological innovation. We made a better arrowhead, figured out how to use tar. Well, the fact is Homo erectus might have used fire, they're saying, millions of years ago, right? But yes, so for 95% of our existence, we really didn't have sort of a technological revolution. It was very, very spread out over tens of thousands of years. In the last 10,000 years, things have picked up a bit, starting with agriculture and move to villages and towns and loss of the hunter-gatherer, better weapons, because a good, like it or not, one of the best indicators of human technological evolution is what weapons we make.
Yep.
Go figure. And so for 10,000 years ago, you get agriculture. 150, 200 years ago, you got the Industrial Revolution, and boy, things really pick up. Really pick up, right? Think about taking a caveman to 1890. My God, right? But now, the digital age, let's call it the 60s, 70s, starts the era, the digital age. And then the 90s, the internet age. The 2020s, the AI age. That pace of innovation, that pace of change, that pace of revolution is exponentially faster, bigger than anything we've seen in the 300,000 years, 10,000 years, 200 years. Stuff is off the charts. Right behind AI, we've got quantum computing in the rearview mirror, and that's going to be with AI. And there's so much change, so much revolutionary change coming so quickly that I think it's human nature to question it, to lack of trust. And so this change is coming quicker than we could get comfortable with it.
Right.
And that's my shimmy tape for today.
People like progress. They embrace it eventually. They rejected it first, and then they learn to love it.
Right. They get comfortable with it. But we're going so fast. Before you can get comfortable, the next thing is here.
Well, but
I think you have a timeline.
At the end of it, it's risk versus reward, right? Even on a personal level, I will adopt something if the risk is less than the reward I get from it. I mean, computers can be bad as well as good. I can't live without one today. My cell phone, my smartphone, if you had told your grandparents that you've got this little thing in your pocket, you could be anywhere in the world and they can reach out to you and talk to you instantly. they would have thought you were absolutely nuts. To your point, Alan, it's gone crazy. I mean, even my parents, they wouldn't believe it. I
Unless
remember
you actually smart.
we had a phone in the house that was a party line. Who knows what a party line is?
My grandmother had that too.
Absolutely. Those are cool. What about, hey, this is a long distance call. Don't stay on so long.
Right.
But,
No, but it's like every other week we get some announcement for an open AI or Gemini or Anthropic about here's a new advancement, something that builds off of this, and you can't even keep track of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just trying to embrace what you have.
That's really the issue. It's the pace of revolution.
I think we can keep track of it. And Alan, let me give you a timeline of semantic technology evolution. It really begins about 3.5 million years ago. Afferensis, use of tools, but really it's the ability to pass down knowledge. Individuals may have done that long before that, but 3.5 million years ago, we started passing down knowledge, passing down narrative, right? 50,000 years ago, we got so complicated, we started writing stories between us, right? And that's the real, you look at human anthropology, that's pretty well documented. And we got to 10,000, 5,000 years ago, and we gotten so complicated that we started writing it down instead of saying it to each other, not saying it face to face. And as I like to say, that's how we got ants, right? Since then, we've been trying to struggle with who gets to write it down, how does it mean, how do I compare to, beyond the personal relationship in small communities. So that when you look at from the establishment of those canonical mimetic structures, in the early, before 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, the printing press, the internet, everything that's happened in 100 years, it's just an acceleration of that same slope. But the tools and mechanisms are the same. The semantic structures we've been developing for about 3.5 million years. So we can engineer this to a certain extent and understand that, semantic, word processes actually lead to outcomes. And if nothing else, AIs are helping us look at how we think and how we make decisions and to my point about civics, how we actually interact. Us incredibly dangerous individuals.
But what's interesting? You're talking about semantics, but you're leaving out a human element. You still haven't addressed the trust issue.
Well, but semantics is how we develop trust. I mean, that is literally, the
We're
struggle.
just going too fast for trust.
So there's another piece to this, guys. Let me try it a little bit different. So I'm the CEO of a company, right? And Alan, you come to me and say, I need a budget to deploy AI. And I look at you and said, Alan, you were here 6 months ago where you needed a budget to deploy this other thing, before AI. And 6 months before that, you came to me for a budget to deploy this other thing.
Well, that's what CISOs do.
Well, right. But none of those are even deployed yet. And now you want something new. So,
and that's part of it too. Guys, I'm looking at my watch though. We're way over. I apologize. We could talk about this obviously for the next 300,000 years, Chris.
We probably will.
Maybe this whole thing is a simulation and we are in the matrix and controlled by AIs. Wow. But we're going to take a break. We're going to come back tomorrow. We'll continue our discussions on the gang as we do. Stay tuned for TechStrong TV following this as usual. We've got a great stuff. Jack, Chris, Teri, John, thank you very much for coming on. I think we'll have Mr. Vizard back tomorrow. So, we'll see how the Yankees are doing. But until then, on behalf of everyone here, this is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong. We're out.